Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code expediting firm here in New York City. I am once again privileged to have Ashley Thompson DiNardo from Capalino's office to come in and talk to me. Welcome, Ashley. Thank you for coming back. So you have the first distinction of a repeat guest, so congratulations.
It's a big honor.
It is, and I really enjoyed our first show. Of course, one of my favorite topics is zoning in New York City because it affects so many people. And I saw you a few weeks ago at a little function, and we talked about you coming back in because there's a lot of things going on in New York City right now, and would like you to, I wanted you to come in to give the our guests an update on what Eric Adams is doing these days with Say Yes to Construction and Development, which I think he's done an amazing job. He is pro-development, which we like. So welcome back. And I guess we'll start right in the heart of it, which I guess is Midtown South zoning, which is what we call the Garment District, right? And I saw a lot of press on that. So why don't you fill us in on that?
Sure. So that's an exciting piece of the puzzle. City Planning held their first public engagement meeting just the other night to start to get feedback on a plan to rezone the manufacturing portions of the Garment District. So this will allow a lot of conversions from commercial manufacturing buildings to residential and create a mixed-use community. And make sure we have a vibrant street life in Midtown, while still preserving a lot of the manufacturing uses that are still there.
And it's a tricky task.
It is a tricky task.
Because you have everything there. Usually manufacturing and residential are kind of split. They're really not together, and we know that from doing a lot of schools that there's a lot of vacant buildings that we can't convert unless we get, an override from the mayor's office that specifically says we can have a school in a manufacturing district, right? So it's not just residential. It's going to be commercial. It's going to be manufacturing. It needs to be, education as well. So give the guests kind of a feel of what the time and the process is to really get, a 50 by 50 block radius or a 30 by 30 block radius, because it affects a lot of buildings. It's not just a handful. It's a substantial amount. So they had their first hearing, and now we move on.
First public meeting to get feedback, answer questions. There will be more engagement with the community over the next couple of months, and then they're expecting to have a more comprehensive plan and hopefully zoning text next spring.
Okay.
So things will be
that's pretty
moving
fast.
I think to your point about kind of melding manufacturing and residential and commercial uses, we talked last time about the city's zoning for economic opportunity
Correct.
text,
which
also
we
moving
need
right now.
Right.
And I think some of that addresses what we are
sure, because
hoping to achieve in the Garment
Right, that would
District.
be exactly what you talked about a few months ago, which is you have a building, and right now you can't have this without that, and then this is here and that's there, and they're kind of segregated and they can't mix together, but yet the community needs both of them. And why can't they both be in the same building? If we make the codes proper, you can do it if you want to do it. The question is how do we now look at a much more aggressive way to have light manufacturing on the second floor, right, commercial on the first floor, and on the upper floors, a couple of apartments. Yep. Because I think then that gives, in my opinion, it keeps the community happy because they get a mix of everything, not just one-sided. Two is I think it gives the developer who wants to partner with the city through this new zoning to redevelop these buildings where they have more opportunity and more economic growth.
Right. I think the way I look at these is they're all pieces to a puzzle, right? The three text amendments that are going through the process right now, you had another guest on who spoke about the carbon neutrality
right,
text. That's in front of the city council. It's expected to be voted on sometime in the next month. So
Right,
that
which
will
is a
go
big
into
one
effect,
because
which
it's
is
going to
huge.
give back some bonuses for dealing with, the carbon neutrality, which is an incentive, right? We always talk about, I've mentioned it a few times on the show, Ashley, and you're the perfect guest to talk about it because you worked on the public side and now on the private side. And meshing both of them together. So sometimes you're on this side, sometimes you're on that side, but you get both ends of it. And one thing that I learned from this show is how important having a partnership with New York City is really the foundation of everything that we do. And I didn't realize that until I had this show, and I have, great guests like yourself that come in and explain how that partnership works, that without a tax change, you maybe can't get more FAR. And, we had Dan Cohen in from Stantec to talk about, hey, if you want to upgrade a train station, we'll make your building bigger. Well, most people don't know that. And I'm in the industry and I really, and I knew it a little bit, but not in the context that I know it now. So clearly, I think that the mayor has done a good job to go back and look at these things to, incentivize the zoning text to help developers and help the community to get what they need.
Absolutely. I think you absolutely hit it on the head when you said that it's a partnership and requires a partnership between private landowners, and that's, developers, it's institutions like faith-based organizations.
Sure.
I think
Everybody.
that's one
No
area
one's excluded.
where we've seen a lot of willingness on the part of the Adams administration to really engage and figure out, if you have a church that has vacant land that maybe you want to redevelop as affordable housing, how do we get that done? And that's something that was just announced a few weeks ago.
And I think, that's a great point, Ashley, because we do, in this office, we do a lot of that work for all different community facilities. And, part of being a community facility is to help the community. So if you have a church and, and you have a school that's not being used, and you have a rectory that's not being used, we've found a way to sublease and lease the schools back to the SCA or to charter schools. So we brought that school back to that community. And that's part of what we're supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to shut a school down and move the children somewhere else. This is their community. It's their playground, right? Now we got all this leftover land. We have no affordable apartments. There should be programs that say, okay, if you're faith-based, you're gonna help us, we're gonna help you, and we're gonna help the community. But we're giving back to the community again. So to me, I love that. That's like, to me, that hits everything, it checks off all the boxes because we feel good about it. You guys feel good about doing the work. We feel good about filing the work, and the community gets what they need. So, those type of incentives, I think, are going to be big.
Right.
So we go down the road a little bit. So we have Midtown South. So before we get out of Manhattan for a minute, where, is the center of the universe, right? And, we talked a little bit about office to residential conversion. And today I read something on LinkedIn that, they estimated another 8 million square feet is going to come up in the next 6 months. We're up to 108 million square feet in the 5 boroughs of commercial space that's vacant. Me personally, we're not getting a lot of requests. I mean, we're doing one right now. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. And just from a code zoning point, from a zoning point, not so much, but from a code standpoint, it's a tough challenge. What are you hearing from the political side of it, and what is there really some traction to this whole thing?
I think right now there are a lot of people who are looking at whether or not it's feasible for their buildings, but as you mentioned, there are still a lot of challenges. Some of those the city is trying to address in the mayor's housing proposal. It was released just a few weeks ago.
Right. So
start
fill the audience in a little bit about the housing proposal, because I think you have it pretty well. And is it zoning? Is it code? Is it both? Is it other items? So just highlight a couple
So
of
this
points.
is the third of the 3 text amendments that are part of the City of Yes. So we talked about carbon neutrality, economic opportunity, and now housing opportunity is the last and probably the biggest one.
Right.
So it was announced a few weeks ago, and we'll actually have a scoping meeting later this month, and we'll start public review probably next spring, so spring 2024.
So that's around the corner too.
Yeah, everything's moving really quickly, which is exciting. One of the proposals in the text amendment is around office to residential conversions.
And is that, not to jump in, but is that really to try to look at the codes related to the multiple dwelling law for these conversions to make it, obviously we always love laws. We want people to be safe,
Yes.
and have a great living environment. But, I'm a proponent, and I've said it before, that law needs to be changed. It's been the multiple dwelling law for that section, Article 6B, it's just been around way too long and it's antiquated.
Yeah, so it won't change the multiple dwelling law since that would require the state. We can talk about the state a little bit later. But it will make things easier for commercial buildings that were built, I believe it's 1990 and earlier. So,
Right? Yeah, it was like the pre-1990.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think the biggest question, though, is in Albany, and we know that these conversions are challenging from an economic perspective. And so whether or not there are incentive programs that can really
So it always
make
goes
this
back
feasible.
to so even though we may change the text, and even though we may get better laws, there still needs to be that partnership that I'm learning about.
Yep, partnership between the city and Albany is just as important as the partnership between the private sector and the public sector.
Absolutely.
And I think the mayor and the governor have done a really good job of working together, and I was optimistic last time I was on the show. I continue to be optimistic that we'll make progress in the upcoming session in January around some of these issues. But the city, for now, is doing what they can in terms of...
Well, they don't have a choice. They can't stand still. I mean, it's like we say, there's no 421A. Okay, well, we need to move on and do something else, right? Your office didn't close up. We didn't close up. We move on to the next place where, where the developers and the architects, they dictate what's going on, right? So the same thing happens for you. There's no 421A. We're not scrambling at the last minute trying to get plans approved anymore, but we're on to something different, right? A lot more rehab of affordable housing, a lot more, institutional work that's coming out, a lot more, technology work, a lot more, yesterday at Building Congress, they talked a lot about a big spike in warehousing and distribution. Well, that was dead for 30 years. I mean, there was just none of it. Now, all of a sudden, it went from the bottom to like second or third. It was, retail's down, housing is down, but yet we have these other things. So, one of the things that everyone asks about is the pipeline. Right? So not to shift from zoning, but part of what's happening now is going to change that pipeline 3 to 4 years from now. Right now, we drive around New York City, there's cranes everywhere. Well, that's because they're still under the old program. And I think that Eric Adams has, he sees that pipeline, and that's why all of these incentives seem to be moving, not incentive, but all these tax changes and the 3 phases that you talked about, they seem to be put out there, and they're moving rather quickly, because without it, a few years from now, we're going to have a major problem.
I don't think we even have to wait a few years from now. I think we're seeing the problem in real time. As you said, last year, everybody was busy getting in the ground to meet the requirements of 421A. But we saw, you mentioned the Building Congress and our good friend Carlos Sarah.
Love Carlo. Carlo, shout out. You do a great job there.
They put out a great report, but it was quite stark. Last year, there was a projected figure of 30,000 residential units would come online this year. It was more like 11,000.
I think that's what it was.
Remy is even estimating it may be closer to 10,000. that's a major problem.
That's a major problem.
And if we're not able to get a replacement program for 421A in the next session,
They got to do
that
something.
pipeline will continue.
Right,
to
maybe
dry
it's
up.
not 421A, but it's something else.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I hear a lot about, and because I really want to get back to the zoning, but the 421A, one of the things that could really help is for them to extend it, because there's many sites right now that we have, and we've said it, and when you were here a few months ago, that we have approvals, we have permits, and they're vested. They can't get financing because it got so crazy expensive. And when they go to the bank to get the finance, they're like, well, you got to have it done in 2 years. Can you build this? Can you build 150 or 200 units in 2 years? And every single developer is afraid, even with approved plans, even with permits. It's just too tight. So I think that one of the concessions that can be made is if between Albany and New York City can decide to extend that and let people go back into the program and have the duration that they need to build the buildings, I think we'll see some of these sites, start to.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely part of the conversation. It
was in June, though.
It was the main conversation in June. It was clear that there was not going to be a new program, but how do we make sure that projects that were in the ground and were real and could deliver actual units of affordable housing could actually get built? And unfortunately, we weren't able to get there for a number of reasons.
Whatever they are, we're not there, right? So it's not our job to speculate or decide who was right or who was wrong. The facts remain the same, that we're here now. We have a program. They got to be done by 2026 in June. I believe it's June is the completion. So if you're not done by that time, you're going to lose your incentive. And then, going from rentals to condos is not going to help our affordable anymore. No. Because then we lose it all again. So, we could talk about the 421A. Everybody, every seminar we go to, right? Even yesterday morning, the first thing is, well, there's no 421A, and everybody knows it's not there, and we get it. But we got to move on, right? We this is a city of resiliency. We need to go to the next place. So, when you were here last, we talked a little bit about rezoning, not only in Manhattan, but we talked about the Bronx. I see a lot of construction going on in the Bronx. We talked about Queens. We've talked about there's a lot of things moving around in Long Island City. There's a lot of things going on in the Bronx. So tell us a little bit more about some of the other text changes that they're trying to implement in the outer boroughs.
Sure. I think this is particularly exciting to me, especially coming from government, because we're seeing the city working closely with communities and elected officials to do comprehensive planning in neighborhoods. Just, let's see, was it last week? Losing track of time, the city announced a comprehensive planning study in Long Island City with Councilmember Julie Wan.
Great.
So that process will
be
getting started.
That's pretty fresh, because we just did that about 15 years ago. It doesn't sound like, but when you look over the bridge, today I was coming over and I looked and I'm like, wow, Long Island City is like a little Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And now they're gonna do more. So that's really exciting.
Right. And I think part of that process will also look at not just housing stock and what's being built, but how does that interact with the streetscape and making sure that there's a vibrant business community and
support,
open space and other infrastructure needs. So
supermarkets, schools,
exactly.
all the things they need.
Right. It's when you have that level of developments, those services also need to come along with it. And so I think the work that the city will be undertaking there is really exciting.
Cool.
Similar process along Atlantic Avenue and in Brooklyn.
But they did that once before also.
They looked at it.
Right. Because is this further to the west?
So this is sort of kind of Prospect Heights, Crown Heights.
Yeah.
So there was a
further east, actually. Sorry.
Right. There was a proposal a few years ago that the community board had put forward that didn't get off the ground.
Well, and Atlantic Avenue is such a wide street. You would think that,
Such a wide street.
and then
there's
the
so
wide
much
streets and
potential.
so much potential there. It's just, it's really a great avenue. I
Right.
mean, it's got a lot of traffic. It definitely has the potential for commercial. It has great views of Brooklyn as well as the other boroughs, as well as even Long Island. If you're high enough up, you could see all the way to the Nassau border.
Right, and great transit access.
Exactly.
But it's very underutilized right now. And so you have, these one-story manufacturing
Right.
buildings fronting on Atlantic Avenue. Nobody wants to walk down Atlantic Avenue. It's not a particularly pleasant experience.
Right.
And we've seen a number of kind of one-off private applications to rezone parcels along the avenue.
And are they pretty, are they usually accepted? Because, I
think
didn't
it's-
realize this, that, each community board has so much of a say in every application, as well as, the borough president has a lot of power here when it comes to zoning. So, the mayor's pushing it, but the community boards also have to buy in as well. It's not just the mayor.
Exactly.
The mayor could say it, but they're the ones who
Right,
actually approve it.
Yeah, and the council's the last stop in ULURP.
Right.
And while community boards and borough presidents have an advisory role, they take that very seriously.
Of
And
course.
I think anyone going into
They're
a
responsible
land
for
use
their
process-
borough, right?
Exactly, and they're on the ground. They know what's happening. And so actually this Atlantic Avenue plan came out of the council members' negotiations during a private application at the beginning of her term. Councilmember
wow.
Hudson really pushed the city to
So
revisit
someone filed
Atlantic
an
Avenue.
application, they looked at it and they're like, wow, this really kind of makes sense. Maybe we should look at it in a bigger picture instead of just this one isolated lot.
Exactly.
Oh,
And,
that's great.
I think when you see
I like that. I like
when you
that.
see what's happening in Gowanus right now,
Right.
which is pretty much my own backyard,
Right.
and I walk up and down Union Street, and
Yeah.
there's construction on both sides, and
We-
things are moving,
Yeah.
housing's getting built, which for me is very exciting because it also means
it was so underutilized.
absolutely, and it means access to the water eventually and other amenities,
Everything.
things like that, and so to see something like that potentially happening along Atlantic Avenue and
Would be fabulous.
looking at city-owned sites to maximize affordable housing, things like that. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I really commend Councilmember Hudson for pushing that forward. And
And it's amazing. The part that I love about having the podcast is that I would sit in my own little world, expediting jobs and talking to the staff and talking to clients, but I'm really getting a lot of enjoyment on how I'm starting to learn about how these changes come. And here's a perfect example where a developer, along with a firm maybe like yours, that goes and puts in an application, spurs change, spurs, hey, this is really good. Maybe this is what our community needs, right? And then from there, it's not just about the affordable housing, because I think a lot of times, Ashley, and you've been on the public side of this, is that, the blinders get put on and it's affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing, get this text change, do this. But zoning is not just about one piece. I always say, where is the education for the children that are going to move in there? Where is the community facility for people to have a place to go to? Where is the social welfare for people to get whatever they need, whether it's a doctor's office or whatever? So it's not just, we need affordable housing. We need affordable housing. Yes, we're way, we said 11,000. We thought 30. We're off 66%, 63%. It's way too much. But at the same time, when they do these text changes, all of those other things come into play, which that's why it takes time.
right, and that's really the benefit of these comprehensive city-led studies. A private applicant really can't kind of deliver those types of infrastructure.
No way.
needs. Sometimes there's an opportunity to incorporate a school into a building, or widen sidewalks, or increase
Correct.
the number of street trees, things like that make the experience better for everybody.
Well, and it's also about like you said, the streetscapes are important. You just You know, you want some greenery, you want some trees, you want wider sidewalks, you want people to feel like, oh, this is a great experience just walking down the street.
Right. But, I think as we're starting to see in Gowanus, having the city really come to the table and make a real commitment to those types of infrastructure needs goes a long way and kind of brings the community along with the plan,
As
right?
they should.
Development is, I know we talked about it on the last show, that it can be a big change for communities.
Oh, without a doubt.
Especially ones that have seen a large number of private applications. And so making sure that the greater community's needs are being met at the same time as we're delivering more affordable housing.
It always goes back now that I've realized that it's all about the partnership. If that developer is willing to partner with the neighborhood, with the community, with the city, things can get done. If it's all one-sided for the city, it usually doesn't get done. And if it's all one-sided for the developer, it doesn't get done. So when there's that mesh, I feel that there's a better opportunity and a better chance for it to become reality. Today I drove in from Connecticut, and I drive through the Bronx a lot, and wow, the Bronx, I'm talking big sites are now, going to get developed along, I'm not, very familiar with a lot of the zoning changes, but I'm starting to see a lot of bigger residential buildings throughout the Bronx, besides the whole thing by the Grand Concourse and towards Manhattan there, but I'm talking deeper into the Bronx. So I know there was some text changes that they've talked about. Is there any movement on that? Any update?
Yeah, so they're still working with the community, and I think we should see more progress in the next couple of months around rezonings near Metro North stations or the new Metro North
So
stations.
they're going to try to do everything along a corridor where the residents can get to work and continue to move the people around, and that makes a lot of sense, because usually where there's a train station, we have a wide street, we could put some bigger buildings, like you said last time, we have a lot of zoning designations along wide streets, along transit, that are very low density.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another piece of the mayor's housing for opportunity proposal, is really incentivizing transit-oriented development. So
The L train did it.
Exactly.
Shaped all of Williamsburg to 14th Street,
Right. And so places like the Bronx, where you have the new Metro North stations coming in, Atlantic Avenue was another great example. You have the LIRR
Sure.
running right
Right.
through there, as well as
Sunnyside's a perfect example. When they rezone that, we have quite a few projects there recently where they moved from Long Island City and they moved a little bit east to the next community, which was Sunnyside, and there's a lot of development there. Again, along a wide street, along a train path. That seems to be, the logical place to start. And when you leave the city, it's the same thing in Westchester, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon. Everywhere where there was a Metro North station, they built high-rise buildings because it just made sense that you could move the people along and they can get to work, they can get to places without, disturbing and drastically changing the center core of a neighborhood that has all
Right.
1 and 2 family houses in it.
Right, and I think one of the pieces of the mayor's proposal that makes a lot of sense is it's not necessarily about how do we build a high rise near
No.
every train station. That's not appropriate in every community.
Correct.
But how can we build kind of moderate multifamily buildings that make sense
For that
close
neighborhood.
to transit and are still within the character and the context of the surrounding community, but maybe utilizing space above a commercial, a one-story commercial building. I know I keep referencing places in Brooklyn, but that's where I live.
Well, that was it's like me.
you know,
This is our home.
I used to live on Smith Street,
Right.
and above the butcher shop, and the owner of the butcher shop was my landlord.
Well, of
right?
course.
Incentivizing that type of development, I think, is really important, and that's what part of the mayor's.
And I
proposal is.
agree. I have a question for you. So, about 8 or 9 years ago, hopefully my memory is correct, east of the City Field, where all the small buildings were where it was all auto repair between there and Flushing, right? They rezoned all that. I did our office, not me personally, but our office did a handful of zoning studies. People looking to buy one-story warehouses, put up residential, and for some reason, it just never happened. For some reason, whatever that zoning text was, I don't know if it was because of the ground, because of this, no one built one building. Right. So the other day I'm driving by and I see that they're starting to clean it all up because I believe that is the future site of the soccer stadium. In your opinion, because you do both sides, right? I say that not in a bad way, but in a great way because that gives you different views, right? Why do you think that zoning text never took off? Because it seems like such an incredible site. You have a view of Manhattan. The planes are coming in. The 7 trains right there. The highways, you could get to JFK in 15 minutes. You could walk to LaGuardia. Right. It seemed like this is a mega spot for hotels, for all of these things. And in my amazement, because we looked at quite a few sites there, not one got built.
Yeah. That's, I'm not going to be an expert on Willetts Point. It's an incredibly complicated and complex situation.
Sure.
A number of stakeholders and a lot of moving parts. But the city is moving forward. In fact, just on Monday, the city actually referred out the rezoning proposal that incorporates the soccer stadium, so things are moving forward.
And as part of that, Ashley, are they going to put some hotels around there? Because it just makes sense.
It's a good question. We'll have to cut this piece out, but I know there is a plan for affordable housing.
Oh, great.
But,
okay. Well,
sure
you just
that.
whatever we need to, whatever. So the text that was there before, now they're going ahead to change the text to allow the stadium to be built, or is it as of right now?
No, the stadium is part of the new text. Yeah.
The new text. So that's great. So it's been an eyesore. I mean, I know people work there, and they've been there since I was a kid. I grew up in Queens. My dad and I always went there to get whatever we needed for our vehicles or whatever. And it was kind of part of the fabric of Queens. That's that's Willetts Point. That's what it was. So, but I'm excited to hear about the soccer stadium. But I just wanted, because on the other side of the river, on the Flushing side, it's booming. They can't build it fast enough, So that's great. That's going to be another major. So we'll have the tennis stadium, Arthur Ashe. We have Citi Field, and now we're going to get the soccer stadium, which I think is
Queens is the premier destination if you're a sports fan these days.
That's great.
No greater experience than going to Flushing Meadow during the U.S. Open, in my opinion.
Oh, awesome. We love it. We love all of it. As you can tell, I have my Met and Knick colors here. So we talked about Queens. We talked about Manhattan. We talked about the Bronx. We can't leave. Obviously, we can't leave Staten Island out. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot going on in Staten Island. Mm-hmm. I did see some zoning texts coming in. Obviously the whole St. George area for a while has been rezoned, but I understand they're starting to move that out. Also deeper into Staten Island. So any updates there that you know of?
So you're stretching my limits of my my memory here. The city did announce a proposal in conjunction with Councilmember Hanks to look at parts of the North Shore. This is both a city planning proposal, but also the city's Economic Development Corporation, EDC, is heavily involved. And I think, as the market has shifted, the wheel is no longer happening. So kind of relooking at the North Shore.
Yeah, I mean, the projects that we worked on the residential side in St. George have done extremely well. Mm-hmm. Those developers and they put a major part of it is affordable, which was great. I mean, again, got transit, you got the ferry. The other thing that I know that was announced this week, which is part of zoning, which is why we talk, you and I, is that Mayor Adams was on the news the other day that they're finally going to open a portion of the park where the old landfill was. I mean, to me, that is an incredible project. Yeah. It was an eyesore. Now all these Staten Island residents, as well as anyone else who feels like they can get on, go over to Staten Island for the day and take the ferry over and, take an Uber there, and they can walk around this, and walk up to the top and look at all of Staten Island. It's really it's really a great project. So, the city needs more of those. I know, not to bring up projects, but we're closely following the Kingsborough Armory up in the Bronx. That RFP is coming out soon, and so we've been following that.
Yeah,
That's very
the RFP
exciting.
is out.
Yeah.
It's, that's such an enormous opportunity.
Oh, it's a big.
It's a big site. It's a complicated site.
Yeah, I was on two RFPs in the last 15 years for that site. So hopefully we'll be on a third.
We
but
Capalino have a lot of history with that site as well.
And it's time that it gets developed.
Yep.
It's time that it gets brought back into the fabric of the Bronx and be utilized, because I think it's just a fabulous place.
It really is, and I think there's been a lot of work again with the community to really create a vision for what the Armory could be.
Because it could be anything.
I mean, and I mean, there's a wide range
Right.
of opportunities there, and so
Yeah,
I think
because it could be retail. It could be. We looked at it when they wanted to make it an ice skating rink, and that was a fabulous project.
yeah, we were
so
involved in that one too.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it can be a number of things, but at the end of the day, it really needs to be a hub for the Kingsbridge community.
Sure.
And I think based on the work that's happened on the ground, I think we're going to see some very exciting proposals come out of that
I think so too. I'm excited to see the creativity of the developers, and because obviously it's not just creativity; it's about the economics of it, right? You could build something great, but if no one's going to go to it, then economically it doesn't work. They have to find both sides of that, and that always makes it fun.
Right. And to their credit, both the mayor and the governor have put in a considerable amount of funding to support the future proposal.
Well, again, and it creates jobs, it creates community, it creates a lot of really great things. And I'm always amazed when I'm on the show that while we're filming it, one of the producers always says, "Well, we're getting to the end," and I always go, "How does it go so fast?" And most people come on, right? And I know the first time you came on, you're like, "Well, what are we going to talk about?" And then all of a sudden, we're like, "We have so much more to say," because I could sit here and talk to you for hours about zoning.
Well, there's a lot going on, and I think that's the really exciting thing about New York right now.
It is. And so Ashley, last time I asked you, I put you on the spot, what'd you think? And you came back and you really gave us what you projected about how quickly the city wanted to implement these things. You were spot on. So congratulations. As our first repeat guest, you're not looking in the rearview mirror, but looking forward, as Andrew says, Andrew Peters, is that the city is being very aggressive. I do believe that. And I think they need to be, because like you said, 11,000 apartments when their goal was 30 is way short. And it just gets worse each day. So as we go, so that you can come back in a couple of months again, tell me what you think the projection is for what can happen in this beginning of January, February, March, the first quarter of 2024, with all of these changes. Optimistic, pessimistic? What do you think?
I'm
it's going to?
still optimistic.
Good.
Look, what we're really looking at, especially as we enter the new year, is what happens in Albany, and particularly the conversation around.
And that's because
420
the
limit.
session starts in January, right?
Session starts in January. The state will kick off its budget process, and I think that is really going to be key. The city is doing what they can from a zoning perspective, but without those incentives,
from the state.
we may see a pipeline grow, but things won't be able to get in the ground, and that's what matters at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
And we're going to have you back again.
All right.
And look forward to it. Ashley, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.